On today's World Insight, the U.S. presidential transition underway. President-elect Joe Biden's picks for key posts. What do they show about the incoming administration's economic and foreign policy? And finding calm and comfort in the arts in a time of global upheaval. On that, get up close with one of China's top-performing artists, Jin Xing.
I'm lucky enough I have art, dance, and stage helping me overcome so many issues.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei, coming to you from Beijing. The program is live. We begin in the United States, where a transition of power is underway. On Tuesday, President-elect Joe Biden had his first top-level President's Daily Briefing. This marks a significant step in the transition, which formally began last week. Mr. Biden has named his picks for several key cabinet posts on economic and foreign policy. Before we get down to a discussion with some of the people in the know, here's a closer look at the President-elect's inner circle.
With 50 days to inauguration, Mr. Biden announces picks to key posts. Former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen was named Treasury Secretary nominee. Neera Tanden, who leads a liberal Washington think tank, was chosen to lead the Office of Management and Budget. As one of the first picks announced by Biden, the post of Secretary of State went to Obama-era official and longtime Biden advisor Tony Blinken. Jake Sullivan, who took part in the Iran nuclear deal negotiations, will be Biden's national security advisor. Linda Thomas Greenfield was named the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Cuban-born Alejandro Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Deputy Secretary during the Obama administration, was nominated to lead the department. Avril Haines, a former top CIA official, was chosen to be the Director of National Intelligence. Obama's former Secretary of State John Kerry, a champion of the Paris Climate Agreement, has been tapped to serve as Biden's climate envoy. If confirmed, many of the positions will be held by women and ethnic minorities for the first time. The president-elect is keen on delivering on his promise to be a president for all Americans and build a cabinet that reflects this diversity. Mr. Biden has said his national security and foreign policy teams would reboot ties with traditional allies and reimagine American foreign policy and restore moral leadership.
Together, these public servants will restore America globally, its global leadership, and its moral leadership, and will ensure that our service members, diplomats, and intelligence professionals can do their job free of politics.
Although Mr. Biden still faces challenges in resetting global ties and restoring norms that shifted under Trump, he has committed to reversing several controversial foreign policy decisions, including promising to return the U.S. to the Paris Climate Accord, the World Health Organization, and open a pathway to negotiations with Iran and Syria. The incoming U.S. president's nominations will still face a confirmation process that is expected to be bitterly polarized.
On the latest with the incoming administration with President-elect Joe Biden. For more, joining us in Washington, D.C., Todd Belt, Professor and Political Management Program Director at George Washington University. In Washington, D.C., Brendan Andrews, entrepreneur and former Hill staffer. In Shanghai, China, Shanding Li, Professor with the Institute of International Studies, Fudan University. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Finally, the first briefing for a president-elect. What have you heard, Mr. Belt? Whether in the Beltway, everything good?
It certainly seems that way. We've moved past the impasse that we had with the release of documentation as well as resources for Biden to really fully start his transition, and this is what he needs. He needs to be able to get those documents and those in-person briefings with people from the administration so that he can know exactly what the Trump administration is doing, what government is doing, so that he can put his stamp on it and he can change things that he wants to change and actually know where the threats are around the world, where our forces are around the world, and what he needs to be able to do once he takes office on the 20th of January.
Mr. Andrews, how do you see his critical picks of foreign policy and also economic policy?
Yeah, I think the picks that Biden has made so far really show him making drawing a line of demarcation between Trump and the Biden administration moving forward. I think up and down the nominations you see people that have served, a lot of them under President Obama, but also folks that are going to take the nation, especially in an international relations sense, in a different direction. And I think you also see Biden trusting black women. Black women were critical to his primary victory in South Carolina with 60% support. Yeah. 91% of black women voted for him in the election in November, and now you see Linda Thomas Greenfield leading as the nominee for ambassador to the United Nations. And this will really be a primary thrust for Biden's foreign policy, because her international relationships as a career foreign service officer are going to be critical in rebuilding some of these multinational agreements. And then also when it comes to China, she will be a primary focal point in building on that U.S.-China relationship in terms of UN reform. There was, of course, some controversy around the IP chief earlier this year. So, yeah.
So we heard from President-elect Biden, it's about restore America leadership. To what extent will he be able to do it politically, Mr. Belt, Professor?
Well, that's certainly the real big challenge. He needs to bring America back together again in terms of Republicans and Democrats at home, as well as rebuilding the foreign service establishment. I mean, you really look at the State Department and intelligence, and they've lost a lot of people over the past few years, and there were a lot of positions that just weren't filled. There's a lot that really needs to be done to just get the Biden administration up and running on foreign policy and to know what's going on. But I do agree that it's going to be a much more multilateral approach. I think that the president-elect will look to have a democracy summit, as he has been saying, and I believe he'll probably go to Europe within the first 100 days to try to rebuild some of those relationships with the European Union and NATO that have really been strained under the Trump administration.
Professor Shen, you've been listening to your American colleagues now. We've seen some interesting phenomena with American politics, and therefore the U.S. approach to the rest of the world. Things are changing every 4 years. You're on one program, and then you're off, and then you're on again. And therefore, people are really, I don't know which adjective to use, how to describe the situation and how to adjust to this situation. Do you think a change of leadership will really mean the trust will come back for the U.S.?
Well, I think whichever is the U.S. administration, the chief purpose is to maintain Americans' global power, global respect to America, and Americans' ability to lead. For this, there is no difference between Trump and Biden or Obama and George W. Bush. But the approach, the way they handle various challenges could be quite different. And this time, I think Mr. Biden would more or less use Obama way to present America's moral image, to give American resources for the world to tap in order to manage those global challenges for global governance. So America is willing to give rather than what Trump has done, unwilling to give but to take from other partners. So this is quite different. But Biden is not Obama. He may do something similar to Obama, but something else which could be different. And Obama has no dialogue with North Korea, but Biden may want to do something.
Well, may want to do something.
Trump is unwilling to talk to Iran.
Go ahead, sir. Sorry.
With North Korea, DPRK. Because Trump initially said fury and fire. He was unwilling to talk to North Korea. He said all options are on the table, which means he has a military option.
Okay.
America always has a military option, but it's unnecessary to speak out. But Biden may want to do something to have some engagement. Trump, after all, has had 3 personal meetings with Kim Jong-un. So I think he would try to be himself, not Obama the third or Trump the second.
Well, that's probably about his personal legacy, but what we care more about in the rest of the world is where America is heading for. Now, Mr. Trump coming into the office later in January, hopefully, is not necessarily the same as when Mr. Obama stepped into his office, because there are already 4 years very different in the United States, and we see that it's further divided as we speak. Politically, for example, Professor Belt, Mr. Biden's hands could be tied, even though he could always use presidential order, executive order, in other words. But to what extent do you think he will be able to extend the branches, olive branches, on some of the issues that he now is talking about? But to what extent will he be able to do it when he's in the office, Mr. Belt?
Well, I mean, that is going to take quite a bit of a reset. The way that we saw Barack Obama when he went to Cairo in 2009 and talked about resetting relations with the Middle East. There can be some symbolic things that he can do. We don't have the travel ban anymore, but he can disavow the Muslim travel ban that Donald Trump had. And he can signal in other ways and hold meetings right away with foreign leaders in a multilateral way that will say to them, we are not going to be transactional anymore. This is not a Donald Trump administration where all he cared about was selling weapons and bringing jobs and looking good internationally and having people say nice things about him, but that we're here to work. And I think that one of the big challenges that we have out there right now is coronavirus, and there's an opportunity to work internationally to try to solve this and to prepare for the next eventuality of another outbreak after this that the scientists tell us we may have.
Talking about coronavirus, Mr. Belt, we did notice that Mr. Biden has yet to announce some of the most important posts that are related to public health issues. So this is very interesting, isn't it? At a time when this is the top priority, he didn't say much about it in terms of people he's likely to choose.
Well, I think that there's a lag there with the information. I mean, this has been one of the things in the transition that the Biden-elect administration, the transition team has been looking forward to finding out exactly what is going on. What does the Center for Disease Control know? What are the data that we have internationally? So I think he needs to get the data first before he can really put the right people in charge to handle the task.
On the other hand, Mr. Andrew, since you're an entrepreneur and you've been talking about economic issues, we have seen difficulties to have the relief package coming out with the political divide right now in Washington. Now, that's likely to continue if the pandemic situation ever worsened. So how do you see the current peaks of future Biden administration be able to overcome political hurdles and try to implement what they preach?
Yeah, you've got Chris Coons in the United States Senate, who has always been described as someone in Biden's inner circle working diligently on some kind of pandemic relief. Nancy Pelosi and Democrats on the House side have passed several relief packages, but they just haven't moved forward in the Senate with President Trump in the White House and with Mitch McConnell as the Republican leader. I think these things are going to come to a head. I think when you look at consumer spending, we just had Black Friday in the United States and Cyber Monday, and of course we'll have Christmas shopping going on throughout the end of the year. That may give people some false hope in terms of where the economy actually is. Yes, people are spending. Yes, people want to get away from this pandemic and enjoy the holidays, but some of those fundamentals of the economy, when you talk about small businesses and their funding, hiring or lack thereof, and the durability of the economy if there is some kind of shutdown that happens because of the pandemic in the next couple of months. I think Biden will have a very serious economic issue on his hands, and it may take that to actually bridge the divide between the Senate and the House because The pandemic issue when it comes to small business has been dire for many months. However, that hasn't yet been enough to get Republicans and Democrats on the same page in Congress to pass legislation.
Those are only issues already everybody's paying attention to. What about China-U.S. relations? Professor Shen, you've been doing research about that for decades now. Of course, over the past few years, turbulent times that probably none of us have experienced before. But looking ahead, is there going to be some real logic change in terms of how the possible Biden administration going to approach China? And how is China preparing for all options? What is likely to be the nature, Professor?
Ambassador Twitting used to say he regrets that at this time there is zero dialogue between the two countries. I think with Mr. Biden's becoming the next U.S. president, this situation would improve. At least Beijing and Washington could partner on how to improve the global climate change, and China-U.S. can cooperate. As the U.S. is going to return, Biden promised that he would bring the U.S. back to the Paris Climate Accord first day when he becomes the president. And he would bring America back to WHO. China has no objection for America to do so. The U.S. could give lots of resources for WHO to work with all member countries, especially for those countries in Africa, in India, where they are suffering from the severe pandemic trouble. So China-U.S. can work together, partner. China has its own vaccine, U.S. its vaccine, each has its own merit. And China-U.S. can end the past few months where when the two countries were competing in an unhealthy way. So pandemic, climate change, North Korea, and JCPOA, I think all this China-U.S. will soon start to have some partnership and cooperation. But I don't think China-U.S. are going to restore all what Obama and China used to do. So that may not be something that Biden wants to do immediately, or he will be able to do. And on human rights, on South China Sea, and on the trade dispute, he would work with China, but he may have his own style, his own trademarks. He would show his own principle, and for this he may be better in a position to partner with the Congress. In the past, the Congress was more tough. And Trump was saying there was some chaos in Hong Kong, indicating that the Hong Kong authority has some legitimacy in handling the chaos. But Biden may see the things differently. So we will see. But in a larger calculation, China-U.S. are going to reset a part of the better relationship pretty soon.
Is Professor Shen too optimistic? Professor Belt from Washington, D.C. Earlier we saw China-U.S. have 140 dialogues. Then during certain years of one administration it shrunk to 4, and then to 2, and then to 1, and then to 0. So how far can we expect the gradual recovery of these dialogue mechanisms?
Right. Well, it's not going to happen overnight. That's for sure. Of course, we know that the Biden administration needs to put people in place in the diplomatic corps, and that can take up to a year to start to fill those positions out. And these are people that he's going to want to get in there who do have some relationships with people on the other side of the bargaining table for him. So that will take some time. Biden's also going to look at some of the such as the the tariffs in the United States. Joe Biden has always said that he's a friend to the American worker, but these tariffs have hurt American workers. This could be used as a bargaining chip, or it could be used as something where Joe Biden could use it as a measure of good faith and get rid of those tariffs right away. And I hate to repeat myself, but there's a real big challenge, which is of course also an opportunity to work together on vaccine production, distribution, and preparations for future public health emergencies. And so there are ways to work together. Of course, China has
talking
just
about that,
concluded its
Professor,
own.
if I could just jump
Yes.
in, you talk about cooperation in terms of vaccines and also
Sure.
public health issues. Absolutely, that should be everybody working on together. If you look at China has already joined the COVAX, which is a platform trying to manufacture, distribute, and also provide funding for vaccine distribution worldwide. Will the U.S., the Biden administration, for example, be able to join at this critical moment? And the U.S., for example, Pfizer will be able to produce huge amount of vaccines over the year, the 1 year, 2021. Will that be shared with the rest of the world? How do you see the Biden administration will make its decision?
Well, that's a really good question, and I don't know. I think the Biden transition team is just getting that information right now about what they know from the Trump administration. So I think it's a little bit early to make those projections, but certainly, scientific information can be shared, right? And then production can be done independently by both countries, and distribution can be made.
Today we have already here Professor Shen coming out of Wall Street Journal reports suggesting the teams and scientists in U.S. CDC have been looking into the virus, and it's not a debate about the origins of the virus, but rather to continue to discover, to trace back as early as possible where the virus might be spreading around all over the world, and be able to find as close as possible to its origin, which of course is the animal jumping to human being. So Professor Shen, do you see there is atmosphere for China and the U.S. despite of the early dirty fight in terms of quote-unquote China virus? Some even politicians talking about this unfair phrase. Be able to come back to cooperate on research in this field, on scientific research, on technological development even, which is quite a field of fight between China and the United States, the second stage of China-U.S. trade war. Professor.
The two countries used to work together on those issues, especially handling Ebola, how to contain them from spreading from Africa. And this time they suspect each other and they blame each other. But as Biden has stated, he is going to bring the U.S. back to WHO. First, he would bring the U.S. back to Paris Climate Change Accord and WHO. And of course, it will take some time for U.S. to do it. But the indicator is clear. U.S. want to be a part of the global effort, not U.S. One-on-one, unilateralism. U.S. India, U.S. Myanmar, U.S. want to do U.S. global. And as China is a part of this system already. So it's very difficult for U.S. not to work with China. But China and the U.S. can work together in a good approach. And China can talk to U.S. where we can share information. And for the WHO expert group visiting China to have those inspection, tracing the origin of the virus, how they spread, China may welcome U.S. scientists to be a part of the WHO group. And when the WHO group would send a delegation to the U.S., U.S. may welcome WHO to bring Chinese scientists to be a part of the visitation group. This would help build trust, rather than China welcome WHO but no U.S. citizen. And the U.S. would welcome WHO but no Chinese citizen.
I got your point.
I think at this time, these two countries should be more open. Welcomes them to be a part of global scientist group, not one nation's group.
Okay.
If the two countries can be more open, more genuine, I think they are going to improve their already very bad relationship.
The good news, of course, is Mr. Blinken, who of course has been nominated as the possible Secretary of State, is a believer in multilateralism. He served in the UN and he has been visiting China. He knows people here. He's been having extended discussions with them. We hope those could be helpful for him and also his team to extend and also start operate their work. particularly China-U.S. relations. Having said that, though, another issue about trade, Mr. Andrews, I'm going to the heart of your concern, trade and economic issues. Now, it's not just within the U.S., but also how U.S. is handling with the rest of the world. Well, there is 4 years of unilateralism. Asia already taken its lead. Japan, for example, taking the lead into CPTPP. Meanwhile, ASEAN, playing ASEAN centrality, already been reaching agreement with China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand on RCEP in such a difficult year. So is the U.S. still have leadership in trade, still have leadership on economic recovery? Many have a big question mark. Your take.
So yes, the U.S. is still a global leader when it comes to economic issues, and I think you'll see President-elect Biden move forward very quickly to fill that gap that was left by the Trump administration, whether it's the moving from the phase 1 to the phase 2 deal between U.S. and China bilaterally, or looking at some of these other multinational trade agreements, and simply, for example, again, going back to Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield at the UN, moving on from this America First rhetoric to a let's cooperate and work together as a first step in the process. And I think this is going to be one of the areas where President-elect Biden will want to distinguish himself significantly from what we've seen in the Trump administration. Now, that doesn't mean that the Biden administration won't be a tough negotiator. I think when you look at phase 1 and are the U.S. and China meeting the goals in terms of purchased goods? We go to intellectual property protection. We talked about innovation a second ago, but it's hard to work together and innovate if you can't protect IP. When it comes to even climate goals, as they're connected to growing how crops are grown and where they're produced and distributed, Biden will continue to be a tough negotiator, but you'll see him lean forward pretty significantly to try to get some deals done, and at minimum put the rhetoric out there that that the U.S. is open for business with the world. Right.
Very interesting things to talk about the intellectual protection. China recently just had a huge conference regarding that at the very top level about intellectual property right protection. It seems that everybody is working toward the same goal. We hope that will also happen after January the 20th. Thank you so much, the three of you, Todd Belt, Brandon Andrews, Shending Li. Really appreciate it. Thank you, gentlemen. Stay safe. And you're watching World Insight. Coming up in the program, finding calm and comfort in the arts in a time of global upheaval. On that, I got up close with one of China's top performing artists, Jin Xing. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The coronavirus pandemic has brought the world on its knees since it broke out nearly a year ago. With economic pain and upended lives, we find comfort and solace in art. This brings to my chat with Jin Xing at the World Economic Forum in Davos in January this year. Jin was one of the 4 cultural leaders to win a Crystal Award at the World Economic Forum annual meeting. She told me what the award means to her and her young Chinese fans, whom she advised to hold onto their dreams. What inspires her to forge on, and how does she understand uncertainties in today's world? Let's hear from an artist. Congratulations for the award and your outstanding achievement for bringing and breaking cultural norms.
Thank you, thank you. Actually, I'm pleased for such a recognition, as I think it's more meaningful for my fans and following who's looking up to me and see what I'm doing for so many years. And this is a big, award for them.
That's true, because they see in you what they treasure. One of the things is about your dance group. The first ever independent modern dance group in China. 20 years.
20 years. Yes, I was surprised. I was surprised. I'm looking back, my God, how I can, continue for 20 years independent. That was a very touching moment in the 2019, December 19, 20, these 2 days I was dancing on stage, and I heard my audience and my friend tell me, when I was dancing on stage, my husband get tears in his eyes. Then asked me, I said, why? Then he said, when I see you dancing on stage, the moment I was thinking back, during this 20 years, how many times you want to give up? Every day you're talking about give up the modern dance company, forget it, close down. But next morning you're still carrying your dance clothes, go to the studio. Then that's the 20 years.
Yes. Wow, think about that. Yes. I also heard stories from friends that yes. you had to pick up the pieces you choreographed 20 years ago, yes. and to dance at this stage with yes. that intensity on the stage. Yes, yes. What was it like?
Well, I think of course, this piece dancing when I was 24 years old. 24 years I choreographed and dancing on myself. And when you're 52, you're dancing exact piece. It's challenging for the physical. Yes. It's dancing, you cannot lie. Your body, your movement on stage, you have to deliver. And the training that moment, of course, my leg not kicked high as when I was 24. I'm not turning that much as 24. But each movement, they have so much meaning and the substance after 20 years gathering, why you want to dance this piece again, why you want to deliver to the audience, what kind of message standing there. Then I think the last scene, I was walking from the backstage yeah. to the front, I talked to, in my inner voice, I said, I deliver my best performance for you. I'm continue standing on this stage, but I don't know how I keep for 20 years, and thank you for being with me. That kind of inner thanks, the moment on stage. Yeah.
I heard about the uproar of the applause in the audience. Yeah. Thank you for that, the performances. But when you think about dance and your life has been making so many turns. Yes. You started as a dancer very young age, yes. and then you became very well known in the contemporary dance field, yes. experimental too. Yes. And then you have the transgender yes. Operation, mm-hmm. which also make quite a splur yes. in the society. Yes. And then you try to establish everything all at the same time. What was it like for you? One after another.
Instead of, I choose to be myself, truly myself. That's my own decision. After that.
But it's not easy.
I know, but everything coming to like a new task to me. Then I said, okay, I make choice, I have to do this. I never expecting myself become TV personalities. But when the TV purchased me to come to be in the TV show, be a judge, and open your own talk show, then I said, okay, because I'm a good communicator.
Mm-hmm, you are.
Yes, I know how to talk with people, even on stage with my body languages. But so that's why I said, I want to share my feeling, my experience with the society. I cannot deny it. I'm not living on an island. So that kind of feelings, that kind of communication, always push me a friend. Of course, your personal history, experience, put you in a very unique position. Mm-hmm. And I think in that moment, I tell myself, just be yourself. People appreciation will be followed later. Mm-hmm. But you're not asking for that. So you have the price pay for your own decision, your choices.
In retrospect, it's so easy to say.
Exactly.
But at that time, be able to put yourself out there under everybody's critique.
Yes.
How did you go through those moments? I'm sure you were not as crystal clear at that moment as you are today. So what was it like?
Instincts. I follow my instincts, then I be there. But I don't know how to dealing with it. But the life, and I'm lucky enough. I always say that I'm lucky enough. I have art, dance, and stage helping me overcome so many issues. When I have difficulties, when I have no way out, I have no idea how I can dealing with certain issues, I run into my studio. I go into the theater, dancing, performance, then helps me overcome, make more clear for myself.
Which pieces help the most?
I think each choreographer, each work, I think, for example, my leading dance, I was dancing the half dream. Yes. I think we're often facing that in a lifetime. You are half there. The rest of the half, you have no control over that, but you have to facing it. I think that helps me a lot. I'm so blessed that I have a certain art form on the stage and theater always beside me.
I'll watch that piece once again to see how you'll be able to release yourself in a way. Yes. You know, in a world of uncertainty, which is the theme of this year's World Economic Forum, you are not only here to talk about your artistic life, you're also discussing very actively with every stakeholders, politicians, business leaders, artists, just to say a few. So what do you make of the uncertainties? You talk about your own personal uncertainties, but what about the world's uncertainty?
Yes, in this World Economic Forum, when I'm sitting in the corner, I can see the people flowing by. And the political decision makers, everything, they are make such huge, major decisions for the world. But I'm thinking, when we are society, in the modern society, each nation, doesn't matter which continent you come from, when the business, politics cannot communicate and go through, why everybody step back a little bit, let the culture and art maybe you have better understanding.
That's a great point.
Then we have a better understanding why we get some talk. I think that's what this World Economic Forum bring the artists into this such economic political forms. So somehow when people cannot get through certain issue, the art, the culture, always a good way to helping better understanding.
You know, here you got a lot of positive energy because people are proactively thinking about things. But what about when you go back to your real life? I mean, everybody's real life. That you have to deal with the daily issues. And sometimes you do have to do this give and take.
Yes.
What about the choices, harsh choices we have to make then? Have you ever thought about that question?
I think be realistic. You know, you can purchase your dream, pursue your dream. But in other hands, you have the real stake, dealing with life. So, for example, I go back, I think about my children's education. I'm looking after my parents, their health, and also continue how I can develop the work, the piece, art piece for my dance company. And same time, what's the TV production purchase to me, and how I make a decision. Do I should go to next production?
How to deal with the paparazzi, how to deal with all of this negative press, everything.
Just dealing with it and be yourself. I think everybody follow your own rhythm, dealing with yourself.
In the highly globalized and digital world, more interactions and cross-border exchanges inevitably take place among the academic, scientific, and artistic circles. So well-known artists do wield the influence and shoulder a bigger responsibility as cultural ambassadors of sorts. Jin Xing says she would like to represent China on the world stage to set the record straight amid a pandemic of disinformation. Talking about China, in a way, because you are here also representing China, not only yourself. So this is a country so much on the rise. Earlier, people were curious about it, but now people are extremely curious about it. So where is China and what is China? I'm sure many people ask you questions related to that. Can you maybe help us to explain from your perspective as an artist and someone who has been doing cultural communications for decades? What is China?
Yes, I think China, you cannot, this modern days, each country, each subject, each topic, you cannot deny this word of China. China strongly there. But I'm as artist, as a cultural, missionary or ambassador, I can tell the people, in the Western world, you still have a lot of misunderstanding about the real China. You may directly get a business deal with China, but how much you know this culture at this nation?
How much should I know? What should I really know if I could ask?
We have different cultural behavior, talking about the rhythm. We are doing things different tempo. For example, I often say that, why are you guys sleeping? We are working. Well, sleeping, you are working. A different rhythm. Can we have a better and give more space? In a certain issue in the Western world, quickly solved, but in China, it take time. I think that kind of understanding should be helps in the future.
But on the other hand, China actually very fast when we are doing things.
Of course. That's also Chinese. That's why we are so strong today. We have the energy, the motivation in our people is very demanding and high. But also we also have an elegant culture, sophisticated culture standing behind us. That's very people didn't see that. As an artist, I was showing that part.
Even though it's easier to say, but there's a lot of issues there, really, what you have just mentioned. Every one of them.
Then we have to truly facing that. Don't deny that. Don't try to cheating yourself. I'm not talking to the outside the world, in the international, also talk to our people. I also talk to my students, my dancers. Actually, you have to honest with yourself. I think that the truth and honesty, I think that's why I get a lot of audience, like communicate with me. Yeah.
You know, my last question, if I can. I know you are running on tight schedule. Dance. I want to come back to that. Where you started. What about that art form? You know, how did you understand it from the very first day of your dancing to today?
Yes.
You have to run a company, you have to get money, you have to do this and then that, make every sure got the salary, and they're happy, and they can dance, and you talk to officials, what can we put on, make sure your groups are going all over the world to perform. Have the artists being cultivated. But what is dance still to you now?
I treasure this language, this body language for each of the equally for the human being. Everybody have a language. Even you are not professional dancer, you're never on stage, but you have your own language. You're sitting there, you're walking, you're standing there, you're lying there. You have your own language. I treasure this language. I transform this language for me to a key to open to the world, discover the world. I treasure that. I often say I'm a blessed.
Go. When you start writing, many preparations have to be done. The pen must be prepared carefully, and the ink should put in proper place called yan tai, with water getting smooth, melting together. Then you have to prepare your brush. Sing.
I have such language in me. Then I want to share and contribute to my society, what am I living.
We are also blessed to have an artist like you, to be able to bring us all to ourselves at the same time.
Thank you, thank you.
I should dance with you one time, then I feel relieved.
Oh,
okay, all right.
Okay.
Jin Xing, it's such a pleasure. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us, World Insight, or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching, and bye for now.